The hour before a major comedy performance is not the hour the audience ever sees. It is not the hour that gets recorded or reviewed or added to any account of what the night was. It exists in the space between the preparation and the thing itself, in the dressing rooms and the corridors and the exterior spaces where performers do whatever it is they do to get from ordinary to ready, from the person they are when they are not performing to the person who walks out onto a stage in front of thousands of people and begins. The comedy festival that brought Katt Williams and Chris Rock onto the same lineup was the kind of event that the industry produces occasionally, and that, in retrospect, acquires a significance that nobody was necessarily assigning to it while it was happening. A strong lineup, a well-attended night, a program that contained, in that hour before the shows began, two performers moving through their separate preparation in the shared space of the backstage area. The crew members who were working the event that night, the people whose jobs kept them in the backstage area during that hour, have described what they observed in ways that are consistent with each other, despite being told separately in different conversations to different people over a period of years. The consistency is not surprising. The things that are worth remembering tend to be remembered accurately, because accuracy is part of what makes them worth remembering. What they describe is not a single conversation, but the texture of an hour. Two performers in the same space, preparing separately, occasionally moving through the same corridor or the same shared area, and the particular quality that the space had during that hour, a quality that the crew members, who had worked many events and many backstage areas, found different from most. The exchange that the crew members have described, the moment that has persisted in their accounts of that particular evening, happened not in the dressing rooms, but in the shared corridor during one of the intervals when both men happened to be in the same space at the same time. Not arranged, not the product of either man deciding to seek the other out, the ordinary proximity that backstage areas produce. What the crew members agree on is the specificity of what was said. Not the content, again, they were not close enough to hear the content precisely, and in the ambient noise of a backstage festival environment, the words themselves were not fully available. What was available was the register. Two performers talking to each other about the work, the way performers talk about the work when there is no particular reason to perform anything. Directly, without the social packaging that most professional conversations between prominent people require. Two people who understood the same form from the inside, finding in the compressed and accidental space of a corridor, encounter something that was worth the few minutes it required. The crew members have each independently used the same word to describe what they witnessed: natural. Not in the sense of informal or casual, the conversation didn't have that quality. In the sense of two people who were in their natural element when they were talking about the thing they had each built their lives around. The conversation had the quality that conversations have when the people in them don't need to explain the framework because they share it already. The shows began. Both men performed. The audiences responded the way audiences respond to major performers on a good night, completely, fully, with the kind of generosity that great work produces. And the evening became, in the public account of it, what such evenings become: a successful night, a strong lineup, a festival that delivered what festivals are supposed to deliver. Chris Rock had arrived at his position in American comedy through a path that, by the mid-2000s, had produced one of the most critically recognized bodies of work in the history of stand-up. He had come through Saturday Night Live as a young cast member in the early 1990s, moved through the comedy circuit with the particular intensity of someone who understood early that the live work was where the real development happened, and had produced, through the 1990s, a series of stand-up specials that were received as not just very good comedy, but as something closer to essential documents, records of a specific way of thinking about race, politics, and American life that had not previously been expressed in quite that form. His voice was precise, analytical, built on a structure of observation that was visible in a way that most comedians' structures are not. You could follow the argument. You could see the construction. And the construction, in his best work, was so tight and so internally consistent that it produced the particular comedy effect of making a room feel, simultaneously, that they were laughing and that they were thinking. Katt Williams's approach to the same form was built on different architecture. Where Chris Rock's work tended toward the visible construction, the argument built step by step, the premise established, and then driven to its conclusion, Katt Williams's work tended toward a different kind of internal consistency. Not argument, but perspective. Not a case being made, but a way of seeing being shared. The laughs came not from the structure being revealed, but from the perspective being inhabited, from the specific feeling of being inside a way of looking at the world that was so precise and so entirely its own that the jokes felt less like constructed material and more like discoveries. Two approaches to the same form. One that made its structure visible and used the visibility to create the comedy, one that made its structure invisible and used the invisibility to create something else. Neither better, neither worse. Both the product of years of live work in real rooms, built through a process that was fundamentally the same, even when the results were fundamentally different. What the hour before the shows produced, the hour in which two comedians with very different approaches to the same form moved through the same backstage space, and briefly, in a corridor, had the kind of conversation that the work sometimes makes possible between people who both understand it, is not the kind of thing that becomes part of any official account of the evening. It happened before the cameras were on. It happened in the space between the preparation and the performance, in the area of a night that produces no footage and no reviews, and no documentation of any kind except the memories of the people who happened to be present. But those memories, for the crew members who hold them, carry something that the official account of the evening, the performances, the audience response, the reviews that were written afterward, doesn't quite contain. The quality of two performers in the hour before everything, doing what performers do in that hour, becoming ready, and finding, briefly and without planning it, that being in the same corridor with someone who understood the form the way you understood it made the hour contain something it hadn't had before they encountered each other in it. What the hour revealed about Katt Williams is something his career had always been demonstrating, but that the backstage space of a major festival showed in a specific register. The capacity to be in the presence of another comedian's approach to the same form, an approach very different from his own, and to find in that difference something worth the time it took to explore. Not competition, not professional courtesy, something closer to the particular respect that practitioners of a difficult craft extend to each other when they recognize, across the differences in their approaches, the same underlying commitment. That's the part of the story most people never heard. Not the performances that filled the festival program, not the audiences that gave them standing ovations, not any of the things that happened when the cameras were on and the tickets had been sold. A backstage corridor, an hour before everything, and a conversation between two comedians who happened to be in the same hallway, finding, briefly, that the hallway was worth being in.